docket is we need to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We have approved the agenda. Next is the approval of the minutes from March 10th, if we can remember back that far. Again, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I approve the minutes as presented.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes as submitted?
Aye.
Motion passes. The minutes are approved as submitted. Introductions?
Carolyn Wallace with Beaufort County Stormwater Utility.
Nathan Sturry, Cranston Engineering.
Julianna Corbin, Environmental Engineer for Beaufort County.
Matthew Randall with Cranston Engineering.
Katie Herrera, Beaufort County Stormwater Manager.
Tiffany Patrick, Stormwater Assistant Administrator.
Van Willis, Town Manager, Port Royal.
Alan Schneider, representing unincorporated Southern Beaufort County.
I'm Mark Feinberg, Chairman, and I represent unincorporated District 9 in Daufuskie Island.
James Clark, I represent unincorporated Port Royal.
Brian Watkins of Bluffton at large.
Kim Jones, representing Town of Bluffton.
Jeff Netzinger, Stormwater Manager, Town of Hilton Head.
We got one left.
And Patrick.
Patrick Mitchell representing Ladies Island.
I apologize for that. I'm not sure how many people from the public we have, but if there is any public comment, now is the time. There being no public comment, we will move directly into reports. Our utility update by Katie Herrera.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'll be taking the list today. First update we've got is for the utility. Awesome. As you know, we've completed all the project milestones for the Center for Watershed Protection in creating the Southern Lowcountry Design Manual. We are still working very closely with the technical subcommittee on finalizing, well, we're working together closely on the SOLOCO manual still as part of the technical subcommittee. We actually met May 13th to review and provide a list of comments to some questions that were posed to the town of Bluffton. Kim, I'll let you speak on that unless you want to talk about it later.
I can speak on it now.
Okay,
Since we're talking about it, because I may not remember later. The town of Bluffton did pass the Silica Regional Ordinance, as it's called, the model ordinance, first reading of last year. It was tabled in February pending additional public comment and concerns that were received in February of this year. As Katie indicated, we've been working together with the technical subcommittee to address those additional comments. Staff is finalizing those for review to give back to not only our partners to ensure that our responses are still consistent and coordinated, and then to re-engage with the public as well. Our anticipated timeframe, as aggressive as this might be, is to take it back to council hopefully for July's second and final reading, if not then perhaps in August. So again, looking to get on board with the county and then our additional partners to follow up for adoption later.
Yep. So as you can see, like she said, we're still working together closely on providing that list of comments to make sure the manual they present for approval and the manual we presented still aligns on those standards. As far as an update on the military installation and delinquent fees, at this time, staff is still working with the legal team to provide an update to our county administrator. There have been some pending litigation that they want to provide to the administrator, and after that, staff will provide information to the board as well. I know that presentation was scheduled to be this month, but because we have not met with the administrator, we want to make sure that happens first, and then we'll present to you all.
There was a point in the last meeting where it was discussed that the rationale for having them make a presentation on whether we wanted to continue to go forward and spend money on legal fees, that maybe diminished returns. And there was some concern by some of the board members that weren't wholeheartedly for that movement to begin with. So I think it's really important that we find out where they really think this is going, because all we're doing is spending legal fees.
Yes. That, once that conversation happens with the county administrator, to have him just make that determination, we will then update the board. So, not off the table yet. Again, I know it was scheduled to be presented this month. We do anticipate that being later on in the fall, or depending on the future meeting schedule. As far as our monitoring update, we did not receive anything from USCB. I will say it's been a fairly dry month up until this last week or so. We have participated in a few monitoring events for our water quality projects and our standard locations as well. So if you ever have questions about that, you can certainly reach out to me. We are anticipating to renew our contract with USCB starting on July 1. That information is going to be provided at the Public Facilities Committee meeting on June 21st for approval at County Council on June 28th. Moving on to the SWUB report. It was requested earlier this year that county staff provide the countywide infrastructure fee reports to each municipality. This is not in our IGA, but when we make our first IGA update, we'll include this language. We've met internally to review what we want to provide, and I will give an update to the SWUB members once we determine the appropriate schedule for providing that report. If you would like it within a certain time frame, I know Van is here, Jeff, Kim, if you would like it within a certain time frame, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll be reaching out to you to let you know what that date will be. For the stormwater related projects update, staff continues to work coordinating easement arrangements with our legal counsel as well as our easement coordinator. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with quite a heavy agenda, but again, we still coordinate monthly with our partners in obtaining easements for projects. Moving on to the Bluffton Flyover Bridge repairs, we are getting some traction on this project. This was put out for bid May 13th, so just last month. We had a pre-bid meeting we participated in on June 3rd with approximately 6 interested vendors to perform the work. When the bid closes on June 15th, our next step is to approve the lowest, most responsive bidder, and that will again be presented at the Public Facilities Committee meeting on June 21st with approval at County Council June 28th. For the Shellpoint Community, we received the final draft of that report on April 16th. Staff met internally with Ms. Linda Bridges of the town of Port Royal and Ms. Alice Howard last month on May 18th, just to prevent some initial findings. And here today, just a little bit later, we'll have a presentation from Cranston Engineering on some of what those findings are. Our next step after this meeting is to host a stakeholder meeting in early July, with a public meeting being held also in the month of July for residents of that community. For the Factory Creek Watershed Academy Park project, at this time we are working to obtain all final, not easements, I'm sorry, the report is incorrect, these are flip-flopped. So we are coordinating for the Academy Park Pond to obtain the land for that property as per the agreement we signed back in 2018 with the developer. That again is going to be presented on the June 21st meeting at Public Facilities for approval at the June 28th meeting for County Council. This is costing the county approximately $1, just so you know the financial impact of that acquisition. The Phase 2 detention basin, that project is also completed. Right now, we're just coordinating getting the easements from the property owner so the county can take over maintenance of that system. That is also on the agenda for, oh, I'm sorry, never mind, scratch that. The Graves property, I know you all had requested information on budgeting and some of the financial impacts from that project. I would like to let you know we received an invoice for the tree fund. The county is responsible for paying half of the tree fund for that project. We did receive that invoice from the county last week, and we are processing for payment to the planning department on that.
Before you leave the Graves project, there was recently a public meeting of the, I may get it incorrectly, but it was like the Public Land Trust, the park they're proposing to build, and they had it for the public, and they were adjacent to the Graves property where they held this meeting for the public. And in looking at the diagram, it looked like they called them lakes, even though I assume they're stormwater retention ponds or basins. And there's now 2.
There are a series of wetland fingers that they will be using for quality.
No, these are 2 big lakes on the map.
I am unaware of 2 big lakes being on this development. There is a large.
I would just ask you to delve into that a little deeper, because that's what was presented. And I asked in this public forum, and it was outside at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. And the people from the public parks personnel, they didn't seem to know what these lakes were for or what they were doing, but they were pretty good sized. And I assumed that one of them was the retention pond that was going to be built and the cost borne by us. Now there seems to be 2, and nobody knows who, why, or when that's going to be paid for.
Okay. I thank you for that information. We actually have a meeting to coordinate with that project tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So we'll have that as a discussion item.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We did also receive their FY22 proposed budget. It does fall in line with what the county has proposed as for our contribution for that project. We do anticipate there being at least one other phase within FY22, but so far we've received the phase 2 proposed budget, which is just over $380,000.
I have one other question about this, and you said that the tree mitigation, I'm ignorant to the fact that tree mitigation is stormwater related.
This project, because it's for the detention pond, they have to remove quite a bit of mature legacy trees. Yeah, yep. So yes, we have to pay into the tree fund for the stormwater pond.
Okay. Not going to comment.
The development agreement, again, stipulates that responsibility. So, no other items on that. We do continue to still monitor at that location. We were actually on site yesterday as well. With Julianna Corbin coming online, we wanted to get her familiar with some of these capital projects we have going on.
You may want to introduce her at this point since you named her.
Sure, yeah. So Julianna Corbin just started early last week, Tuesday morning. She is a recent Clemson graduate. She has obtained her EIT, and we very much so look forward to having her on our team. And she'll be taking over the capital improvement projects. She'll also be working closely with me on MS4 items and she will also take over for a stormwater plan review. Right now, we have a special projects engineer, Mr. Tanner Powell, handling that, but eventually Julianna, once she's certified, will take over that role as well.
Speaking for the Stormwater Management Utility Board, we welcome you.
Thank you. At this time, there's no updates on Whitehall or the Seal of Arise Plan Committee. Moving on to professional contracts. The Salt Creek project, county staff, as well as Andrews Engineering, has coordinated getting in touch with these property owners to determine what their level of interest in participating in this project will be. Same thing for the Shanklin Road project. We sent that information out on May 21st. So far, we have heard back from one property owner who is interested in participating in that BMP project, where we'll be routing drainage from Rosita Road as well as the ditch alongside the Spanish Moss Trail to a series of BMPs before it outfalls into Salt Creek and eventually Albergati. Brewer Memorial, we have chosen the lowest, most responsive bidder for that contract. Finally moving forward with construction on this one. Again, this will be presented to the contractor at the Public Facilities Committee for approval, and again for final approval at County Council June 28th. We have a lot of agenda items on the June 21st Public Facilities meeting and the June 28th meeting for Council. So I will be out of town for Public Facilities, so I encourage you all to watch as well.
Can we attend in person?
I believe so, yes. But I can confirm that
Please.
with the communications team. Evergreen project, update on that. They are still working very diligently on construction. At this time, the land has been cleared. They just need to remove some of the, I guess, debris from the trees that they've mulched up, and then they can start digging on that. So we're moving along pretty quickly there. And we still continue to coordinate regularly with our consultant, Woolpert, on some of the scopes we have for them. We are anticipating a few drainage study scopes being presented, as well as some assistance with our tax run, which is kicking off here very soon. Some work has already been started on that. And the program audit as well. So we're hoping to hear back from that soon as well. Regional coordination. The Mossy Oaks Task Force, I know I said that we were working to start some monitoring at 4 chosen locations based on the construction. That monitoring actually happened on June 2nd, and that will be by every other week. We'll be out sampling at those locations. It's on the same monitoring schedule as the Pepper Hall property as well. And the May River watershed modeling
Is complete.
Okay.
Is complete. I'm sorry, I forgot that was there. That is part of the May River Watershed Action Plan update that was completed by McCormick Taylor and was adopted by resolution by Town Council back in February, I believe it was. So these are the updated XP swim models for the headwaters area, leading to obviously the shellfish impaired regions of the May River, and identifying those potential subbasins that are most likely good candidates for BMP retrofit projects, primarily restoring impervious surfaces to infiltration pervious surfaces. With the passage of our FY22 budget last night, we now know that we have $75,000 in this fiscal year's budget to begin initial geotech work on the top 11 recommended priority projects that came out of the action plan update as a result of that monitoring. So that'll be moving forward. July 1, Dan will be getting some RFPs out, I guess.
Awesome. So I can take this.
So that can come off.
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect.
Look at that.
I like taking things
Taking
off.
things off is good.
Municipal reports, we didn't receive any reports, but I'll open the floor to you all if there's anything you'd like to bring up while
I
we're
have
all
to
here.
apologize on that one. We switched to a new format for submitting our reports to council. I haven't quite figured out how to mine that to regurgitate it to y'all. But a couple of quick points, again, with the budget passing last night. Obviously, we'll still be supporting USCB and the water quality monitoring lab. But additionally, we're going to establish a new laboratory effort with USCB up here on North Campus for microbial source tracking. We were able to purchase microbial source tracking equipment last fiscal year, and then now with the new start of this fiscal year, we'll be able to support Dr. Tai Pate in coming up with the protocols that are similar to what used to be called Source Molecular. They have a new name, same company, just acquired by somebody else down in Florida. So I believe as of this month, we're starting to duplicate samples, split samples between USCB, and if not this month, then next month, USCB and Florida. So that'll be a big one that hopefully regionally we can all tie into if other municipalities in the future put it in their fiscal year budgets as well to go ahead and see if we can get to the source of our fecal coliform issues. Those are the big things. There's other stuff. 2018 grants going on, normal stuff. The reviews are busy.
Yeah.
So the town of Hilton Head is, we're still experiencing some serious staff shortages in our engineering department at large, and some of us stormwater folks are having help out with that. We still have Jeff Buckaloo is in the acting role, trying to fill Scott Liggett's shoes. We're still searching for a replacement for the directorship on a permanent basis. So we're scrambling a little bit. We lost Christina Martin, our stormwater engineer. She had left. Her husband got reassigned to the military, so she moved to Missouri for a year. So we're actively trying to refill that position. So a lot of transition pains going over the last 6 months since Steve Riley's retirement and getting used to the Mark Orlando as a new town manager. So transition period, but we're looking forward to a great new fiscal 22. So we finished reconstruction of the Watton pump station in Sea Pines, and that has been tested and is storm ready for the upcoming hurricane season, or I guess the hurricane season is already upon us. So that was good news. So 2 years in a row, 2 reconstructed pump stations, and looking good. So.
Man, anything?
Just, we have one small project right now. We're installing a water control structure as part of the Cypress Wetlands project. We did the renovation work. We kind of put an earthen berm in. However, we delayed installation because of the birds and the chicks. Once all that kind of clears out, we'll get that done. Took us a while to get the Corps of Engineer permit, but other than that, we're fine.
Okay. And I know too, the intention was to have that meeting with you all kind of on site. So we'll definitely reschedule that in the fall, hopefully a little bit cooler, and you know, it looks great outside now, but you're darned if you do and darned if you don't. So thanks for that. Moving on to the Ms4 report, I just wanted to provide a quick update on our org chart. Again, we have filled the position for the environmental engineer. That position was previously known as the assistant stormwater manager. Regulatory and management is fully staffed at this time. We, like Jeff, are experiencing a little bit of staff shortages. We just had our administrative technician leave the program. She was with our infrastructure side. So while we do not anticipate skipping a beat on those project reports, there may be times when we're not as up to date as we would like to be. Other than that, we still do have 1 or 2 vacancies within our infrastructure program, and then we'll be fully staffed. I know that y'all were interested in that last time. Mm-hmm. I think from here, we'll just provide updates on any changes. It'll be included in the board packet just to keep you up to date. Plan reviews. This again, similar to the town of Bluffton, we have really not seen a slowdown in the amount of work coming into the county. We've issued quite a few CFCs. It slowed down a little bit, but again, that permit issuance is still pretty high up there with 60 60 newly issued permits just in the month of May alone. For our monthly inspections, as part of our org chart update, we hired a new stormwater inspector on May 10th. And having him on board has been a huge blessing. We're finally stabilizing the amount of workload that we have with him there. And you'll kind of notice that inspections have slowed down, but not by too much with the holiday and some other events that we participated in. Rain report, it was dry in May. We did not get anything over 1.5 inches at all, even in summary for the entire month. So it has been, Sheldon area got just over 2 inches, but it's been, working in stormwater, it's kind of nice on these dry days. And then when we have this wet weather like we've seen the last few weeks, things tend to get a little bit more interesting. So, and Ellen Camo was unable to participate in the meeting today, but she has provided that report. One item of particular interest is the coloring contest called That's My Truck. We closed that competition down as of yesterday, and we received all the applicant information. So I have the pleasure of being a guest judge in this event, and we look forward to seeing what the submissions look like for naming our vacuum trucks and our sweeper truck. Our Intergov permitting software, again, this is to take everything digitally instead of paper copies. At this time, it has been delayed again. We are in our 3rd round of testing, and the new anticipated deadline is late September, early October to have that software go live. We participated in the South Carolina Association of Stormwater Managers last week. We had our quarterly meeting. I was able to touch base with the permit writer for DHEC, and in asking when we were going to see this new permit, I was told there are 2 phase 1 communities that need their permits finished, and then it would move into the phase 2 permit. So with the census data not out, I think that's another reason why they're waiting on the MS4 permit update. But at this time, that's all the information I have. Oh, is it maintenance reports now? All right. Maintenance reports. So again, Matt Rausch couldn't participate today. He's our stormwater infrastructure superintendent. We had one major project come to completion in the last 2 months, and we had 8 smaller projects come to completion in the last few months as well. That information is in the report. I will attempt to answer any questions you all may have about those projects. Lots of clearing drainage systems, vacuuming out systems, getting ready for the hurricane season. Again, it's already here, but making sure we've got clear drainage pathways for what we may end up having to deal with this season. Well, with no questions, I think that's it. I know we scheduled some time for Miss Alice Howard to present information, but she's not here, so I will go take a seat. Thank you.
Before I ask, take your seat. I'm going to give you a chance to rest. Because I think, I'm not sure, but unfinished or old business, what I thought was going to be unfinished or old business has been put on to new business, which is fine. But is there anything from any of the board from an unfinished or old business perspective?
One question of clarification, and Katie, I think this probably does involve you, unfortunately. There had been some discussion right as we were breaking at some point about the ex officio status, where Ms. Howard had had interest in granting ex officios voting privileges, yet the history of the utility had been structured such that the other jurisdictions were not telling the county how to run their stormwater program by having a vote. And I know that there were going to be there were intents of discussions, and I don't know if those actually occurred before we lost Scott, sort of as the historian of the utility.
Yes, so we have had those conversations internally and as well as with Ms. Howard. At this time, we have not made a decision. I do know with the census data, there could be potentials for redrawing districts, and at that time, it would be a good time to revisit that approach.
From the standpoint, maybe either of you can answer, would this be a SWIC or a natural resource decision? Is it a county council decision? Is it our decision? Is it administrative fiat?
I think that's going to go to county legal.
Yes, so
Just thought I'd
That would be my
ask,
guess.
where does the rubber meet the road here?
we cannot, one of the avenues we were considering taking on this, having all participating members become active board members. However, we do have municipalities as ex officios that would not be able to vote on Beaufort County specific items. And from the legal point of view, we can't limit anyone's ability if they are considered a full board member.
So it's all in or all out.
I'm sorry.
All in or all out.
Right.
Either you're voting or you're not. You can't vote on some things, but not on others.
Right, so
You could not recuse yourself if it involved your area? Is that why they're
If it
saying?
involved the county.
I mean, I would think that this board, and I'm, the new chairman here for one meeting, where we go, I mean, we have made recommendations from this board in the past, and I think it would be advantageous for whether it be council or legal or whomever to hear from us as to what we think on that subject.
That's your prerogative.
I would think.
I'm not a voting member.
I know, but we do elicit your comments and opinions.
Exactly.
So I would like to hear, number one, from the three jurisdictions that are represented here today, what your feelings are. And then we should talk about it and vote, and if there's any discussion, and then we should vote to say what we think about it. Is it good?
Or is that question supposed to strictly go to legal? Our question.
For procedure? I don't know.
yeah, it really needs to go to legal. Because, again, we don't have a say-so in the budgets and the management of the municipalities. And to that same token, they shouldn't have the same voting authority on the board in that manner. And we can't limit them from voting if they become a full-fledged board member, an active board member.
I think if you look at it this way, because of the way the stormwater utility funds are segregated, like the funds collected in Port Royal go to Port Royal. If there were taxes, it would be a different situation because Port Royal residents would be paying taxes for the operation of the stormwater utility if it was constructed that way. And so there would be some logic to us participating in those financial decisions or spending decisions. But I think, with the way that we've segregated that, I think that is probably appropriate. I know, I think you may be speaking to policy if there are some things, the stormwater manual or regulations. There may be some merit to that, and that could be one of those scenarios where this board does make recommendations that ultimately are made at my council level and county council level and Bluffton's county council level. But I think that's kind of where we are. And we may have different priorities in terms of how those expenditures are happening.
My thing on expenditures, we vote, but
Right.
we basically don't say yes or no. We basically offer an opinion that we, how would you call it, Alan? How we feel about the budget, but I don't think we approve the budget. Is that correct? We make a recommendation to approve it, but we don't approve it. So I don't see a real problem with the municipalities having input into it. I really don't, because we don't have that approval process. All we have is a recommendation. That's just my own philosophical point.
Then I think the question for the legal is there anything in your enabling legislation for the stormwater utility that gives y'all any autonomy to make any sort of decisions that don't rise to the level of being finalized by county council or a recommending body, I guess? In those cases, who knows?
Right. The ex officio members became a part of this board to provide expertise on some of the subject matter and to provide their inputs on different projects, or they're the subject matter experts for each of their jurisdictions, but the intent was to never have them as voting members. So I see your point that if you're making a recommendation, not an approval, they could have the say-so, but again, that's a question for the legal department.
I guess we'll throw it to legal and see what they come back. Any comments from any other board members?
I forgot why this came up.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask the same thing. Is there a reason?
What brought this up?
Ms. Howard had brought it up. I think.
Okay.
So the Stormwater Utility Board is the only board that is represented by different districts, but they don't go with the actual district lines of the county council. So every county, all the other boards have representatives from each district. We just have more general district.
Where the districts in stormwater are different than the districts of representation is what you're saying. I think my district representative is for 7, but I'm District 9.
Right.
Doesn't match up.
And Alice is in a similar position as well. So with the redistricting out of the census, it could be a good, that would be a good time to have that discussion again.
Sounds fair.
Probably just put it in writing what your question is, give it to her and let legal look at it and give it.
Oh, I don't have a question. It was Ms. Howard. It was Councilwoman Howard, not me. It was just out there as unfinished business. I was curious.
Yes, we have met with her on that, as well as with the legal team. And at this time, again, we have not made a decision on if we're going to redistrict the utility board.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is there any other unfinished business from anyone? Before you sit down, we might as well move into new business.
Oh, no, that's not me.
Oh, okay.
Brought a cup of water.
Shellpoint drainage study?
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Matt Randall, the Coastal Civil Engineering Department Manager for Cranston Engineering. This is Nathan Sturry, one of our project engineers who really did all the heavy lifting on this study. As you know, the county contracted with Cranston Engineering to analyze the stormwater infrastructure within the Shellpoint Community in Port Royal and look at, I guess, different options to improve the situation. The county received numerous complaints from flooding in private properties, over roadways, and in ditches. So we have completed the study. We looked at many different rainfall events. We certainly looked at the different tidal influences, as well as sea level rise, or projected sea level rise of 15 inches. And we came up with some recommendations for improvements and showed on this slide here in front of you, shows some of the modeled improvements that we had. Just to go a little bit on the background, how the process worked is we worked closely with the county's GIS department and Public Works Department to gather all the pertinent GIS data. We looked at existing plans from SCDOT, the town of Port Royal, and Beaufort County, both as-built and design plans. We looked at different FEMA maps and NOAA, tide, and rainfall data. And we also looked at, obviously, all of the different complaint logs from the citizens that Beaufort County had. Nathan will go into that a little later. And we also had a public meeting and received a significant amount of input from the community. This was all during COVID too, which was a little challenging, so we had a lot of emails and conference calls as well, going back and forth. So after we compiled all that data, we came up with some preliminary maps, and then we sent our folks out into the field to verify that information, to fill in the holes, really assess the current system. We got that assessment, and we began our existing conditions model. We then also sent out a full survey crew to kind of truth all of that. So the initial investigation used some GPS equipment, but it wasn't survey grade. But for some of the critical areas, we really wanted to have that survey grade data available. So we went out and picked up some additional survey for that. And basically, I'll let Nathan kind of describe the process from here. These are the different outfalls shown, and he'll go into some of the improvements shown. Nathan, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, so this is our kind of overall watershed that we modeled. It's about total 880 acres that we modeled and 14 outfalls, individual outfalls. During the field collection process, we identified 2 additional outfalls that were previously unknown, one off of Baynard Road, and the other outfall 14 under, I believe that's Paris Island Gateway near the ramps to Paris Island. These are relatively small, but you can see our model had 400 individual drainage structures, about 62,000 linear feet of open channel, and about 50,000 linear feet of closed conduit. It's a very big system. Here's kind of the elevations based on the LiDAR data that we modeled. You can see it ranges from about -5 in the tidal creeks to about 40.3 elevation, kind of in the higher areas. You can see them in red. Here's one you guys will probably really care about, the municipal boundaries. You can see Beaufort County is the shaded green, the town of Port Royal is in blue, and then the roads are all labeled. Majority of them you can see are SCDOT maintained, and these are the ones that really presented the issues in terms of being poorly maintained. All the culverts were full of sediment, need to be cleaned out. The red on this map indicates existing Beaufort County easements where potential stormwater improvements were looked at and analyzed to reduce the hours flooded, as you saw in that first chart we showed. So here's the initial citizen complaints that we received, which kind of helped us pick the areas we were going to focus on in terms of these drainage improvements and where we're going to run new ditches. They're really highly concentrated, mainly along those neighborhoods along Dogwood and along the Shellpoint Farm or Shellpoint Road and Broad River Drive. You can see there's 2 down in Hamrick. That first photo we showed you with the significant flooding, that was Hamrick Drive, where it had about 2 foot of water above the road, which is, we received more than one complaint in that. So this is a map using LiDAR data, which just shows the ground elevation. It's kind of the difficulty we had to work with when coming up with these proposed improvements, because how do you battle low ground besides building it up? You can kind of see mean high water we obtained from the Broad River Bridge tidal station, about 3.5 elevation. Anything on these maps you see in blue is going to be underwater. When we added 15 inches to the mean high water, it's still, you can see down in the lower corner, it's starting to fill up near Broad River Drive, Hamrick Drive region. The highest observed tide that we analyzed was about 6.14, which occurred on November 15th. And this was king tide. And when we add sea level rise to that one, you can really see the impact that it makes. You're up at around 7.5 elevation. We really wanted to drill in on these two areas here. This is the Hamrick Drive neighborhood. This is where the majority of the complaints came in. If you can just kind of scroll through slowly the next 4, you can kind of see the different models we looked at. You go to the next one, and then the next one, you'll see that the sea level rise really impacts this area. This is where the new Cross Community Church is going to go off of Hamrick Drive. This also is the Dogwood back to Magnolia Street system. We'll just kind of scroll through those. You can really see the impact that the tidal sea level rise is really going to have for these systems.
Question, the spring tide, how is that affected? The biggest one of the year?
That's what we were showing.
That's the one, okay.
Yes, sir. And that was a tidal change of about 10.5 foot. So, using those sea level rise areas and identifying low areas, we came up with this priority chart to begin our analysis. You can see along Baynard Road, just all the really different areas in pink, all along Broad River Drive, basically from Harris Island Gateway down to Hamrick. That whole system needed improvements and upsizing. Just some main ditch cleaning really along Baynard, Shellpoint Farms, ditch cleaning will handle most of that. The Dogwood, which is in purple, is the major improvements. I'm not sure if you guys were all handed out the packet that we sent out with the proposed improvements.
Digital.
We weren't going to
It's digital.
dive too much detail into that, but you can see in this chart, we significantly reduced the hours flooded for all storm events. For the 2-year, we kept almost everything in the system in these areas. The 25-year, there's a few areas that popped up over an hour, but for the most part, we were able to get the flooding significantly reduced. And most of that came from just cleaning out the ditches and the culverts that were clogged. Most of them were 70 to 80% clogged up and really not operating as efficiently as they should be.
Has that been put onto a rotation to be cleaned? Or is that still a future project? That's DOT?
They're all the ones we're.
They're all DOT, okay.
DOT, mainly Baynard, Shellpoint Farms, and Broad River Drive.
And all that's been on DOT's hit list?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll be having a meeting with them as well, after we have the utility board meeting. To
Okay.
kind of discuss with them what their results are, including, we had OCRM, Army Corps of Engineers, town and county staff, just to get everybody on the same page on the types of projects that need to be tackled from this report.
Is there any potential improvements to those areas that DOT can spearhead to correct those issues, to lessen the impact? Because looking at that one road that was hugely affected, that would greatly slow EMS and fire response in that area.
Sure, absolutely. And we looked at things like tide gates, installing tide gates on box culverts, implementing floodplains throughout the whole drainage easement to try to give that flood water somewhere to go.
Somewhere else to go.
Rather than sending more tidal flow back up into the system by digging out these ditches.
Were any of those houses in that area affected by that flooding?
Absolutely.
Foundation wise?
If you could go back to like yeah, just like this
Right there,
one,
yeah.
go back to the last one. Like that one, I mean, you're not gonna raise those houses, so there's.
And that's with sea level rise and 50
Yeah.
percentage, but.
And in some of these, I mean, the houses are built on slab and they're 2-3 feet below the road.
Yeah.
And they have driveways.
Correct.
To shoot, yeah.
And obviously, I mean, we're not gonna solve all the
Oh, yeah.
flooding problems, people are gonna have to learn to live with it more and more, but there are, significant improvements that can be made that we showed, like Nathan said, reducing the amount of flooding, the number of structures flooded, but really the time of, the area being flooded, with some relatively efficient fixes, like as Nathan mentioned, certainly cleaning is a big thing, but we also looked at upsizing some significant culvert crossings and installing tide gates, which will help a lot, obviously, during the highest of tides. Well, I mean, they'll still be flooded during those times, but it'll decrease the amount of time flooded. And so we felt like we've come up with a good priority list and obviously looked at the different jurisdictional areas where the improvements can be made. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you are, a lot of that is with DOT. So hopefully they'll step up to the plate and make things.
Are these residents mainly the course of all the complaints? And are they being told that, that's being worked?
They're aware of the study and
Okay, so they're
been involved in it from the beginning. There's some, obviously some local leaders that kind of stepped up and gave us a lot of the existing
Good.
data. Actually, hadn't been involved quite as much as I had originally thought, but he had some other, priorities come up in his life. But certainly they're involved in some of the next steps. As Kate mentioned, we're going to have some more public meetings and to update them and sort of additional feedback. And from here, we'll have to look at implementing some of the improvements.
Yeah, so I guess with some of the recommended improvements, did y'all put any kind of cost guess on any? Yeah, any kind of estimating construction?
Yeah, based on with budget constraints, we reduced some of the original scope.
Would some of the engineering design be a lot easier now that y'all have already done the study?
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, once we,
There still is additional design, obviously, besides just the study.
Yeah. But it was a larger scale, macro look, and then as we, I guess, come up and agree to the priorities we want to start, it'll show, obviously give the most benefit with the least amount of cost potentially. Then we'll start there. We can focus on the areas. Just any project typically will have preliminary engineering phases, and that's really what this is.
Yeah.
And so certainly we'll have to get detailed surveys in those areas and come up with a final design and implement that. So there's still significant work to be done, but certain things like ditch cleaning, or even we can come up, Nathan's come up with like a typical ditch section with a floodway that the county can take and potentially start some of that work. Obviously the cleaning as well, or DOT.
Isn't a sidewalk contemplated for this road? I think it's included in one of the project lists.
For the penny tax.
So I don't know if when they're in there potentially doing that sidewalk project, if they could address some of the maintenance or improvements, because it might be able to leverage some of those dollars with some of your stormwater utility funds.
And our hope too is that this project would qualify for grants as well, so that it's not entirely funded by one source,
Right.
the county, DOT, town. And with a lot of those roads being DOT, we want to be creative with our funding sources as well for these projects. But absolutely, as we're discussing the sidewalk, the proposed sidewalk in that area, this will all be taken.
Do you have any idea, like, just curious, like, based on the recommendation, you said a lot of it can be done with the DOT cleaning stuff. Is it as extensive as, say, what had to be done in Mossy Oaks?
Potentially.
Oh, but okay.
Potentially.
I would think along like the Hickory Street area, all those ditches were just recently cleaned, and it's going to be very similar to what that looks like now.
Well, May's rainfall helps a lot of things. Probably helps the phone calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Potentially, you can distribute all that proposed improvements if they see all those. You can just a packet of those to distribute.
Did you do the drainage runoff coefficients for the areas and what capacities the drainage dishes were able to handle?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it was modeled with the PC Swim software and all of that. The runoff data is in there.
Using many end numbers for overland flow, and the TCs were calculated more on slope and length than anything in that model. And then there's a certain storage factor that the pervious and impervious area would take out of that water. So
the capacity of the ditch wasn't necessarily calculated on volume basis or anything. We just looked at from the results of the flooding results in each point. I mean, there's multiple points on each ditch. When we say a structure is flooded or is more of a node that's flooded, I mean, it'll show a surcharge which would be over the top of the anchor of the ditch. And that's factored into the when and how long that area is flooded for. So that can all do with
The ditch cross sections that we use for the major ditch improvements, they utilize a floodplain, so you're not sending like additional stormwater through it. It's building up above the normal water level, and we're providing capacity for that stormwater runoff in those solutions rather than trying to widen these ditches for normal flows.
Yeah, what I was looking at was the amount of building that's been going on and the total amount of runoff that's going. And the particular event that initiated this study was a 4-inch rainfall in 4 hours, which an inch an hour don't sound like much, but after the first hour, it instead of having an amount of rainfall and infiltration, you don't have any. It's all total runoff capacity then. And the Hamrick crossing was about 50% occluded. So that's part of the reason for all that build up and throughout that area. But when you have 4 inches in 4 hours, it's going to be a lot of water running off. And with all the building going around there, if the drainage is not updated along with that, it's going to be more problems.
correct, and that's part of the use, I think, of this model. We're going to be an interactive model and can be updated. The county will have access and will have the model itself. And not only look at individual nodes, but also look at different scenarios and look at different potential.
And we did take into account all the on-site BMPs that are existing to try to slow that flow as those storms come through. We mainly designed for the 25-year for our systems, but 4 inches over an hour, that's about...
Well, 4 hours.
4 hours, yeah, that's a little bit hard to design for realistically in the full scheme of things. So.
Yeah, I mean, a scenario like that could be easily run, certainly, and to see how it's currently affecting the areas and then with the proposed improvements, how it's affecting. So if that's something that is decided to be looked at, or one of the criteria is for certainly to decide on what improvements to make, that's certainly.
Well, it's obvious that your observations of DOT's maintenance responsibilities or lack of thereof it have definitely impacted this area over time. And it's not the first time that since I've been on this board, we've had issues with DOT roadways that are under their jurisdiction. And I think they keep throwing it back to the county and municipalities that they don't have the manpower and we're supposed to take care of it. But put it as simply as I can.
Edie, can I ask you a quick question? This report's obviously just finalized, and I'm sure you're just getting it in point. Is this going to go over to planning as evidence or help to bolster with the sea level rise task force efforts on the overlay district? Because this might be great evidence to help Rob move that policy piece forward, to say, here, we've got the modeling that shows with sea level rise, these areas are potentially inundated.
Is that the All-Joy issue? Is that the ones on All-Joy?
No, this is countywide, the Sea Level Rise Task Force, so it's much larger. It started out of the Ladies Island plan and with Rob Merchant out of planning. But one of the things that the group was discussing was essentially a disclosure statement in real estate of these properties and the 50-year projections for sea level rise potentially could be inundated. So eyes wide open as you're purchasing property, you might be good for 25 years, but maybe not at the end of it. And I just think it would be useful for him.
Looped in on this, the results of this study. Certainly, we can control what goes on within the county's jurisdiction.
Right.
Not only within the towns, but it will all be considered as the area grows. I know there was a question about from Mr. Clark, the impact of the new Shellpoint Farms putting in that subdivision. And I had actually asked Nathan how that looked within the model. Are there choke points or are there extra flooding? Is there extra flooding in the area related to that development? And it was functioning perfectly. So it's been good to show where it's working well and then where it's not. This is as a whole. So I think they probably got some more, right?
Well, we were hoping to go over this improvements packet.
Could I ask two questions before we move on? Where did the 15 inches come from? And was the outfall condition in the PC SWUB model dynamic, or did you have a fixed scale?
We used the diurnal tide based on mean high to mean low that we saw at the Beaufort tile station at all outfall locations. What was the first question?
The 15-inch.
The 15-inch, Katie gave us that as part of the sea level rise study. That's the number they're using. So we just incorporated that.
What they're projecting the average sea level rise to be in 50 years. It was,
This is just something that's loosely being used at this point, or is
no one's using
made an
it.
initial recommendation?
I mean, I got that information from
Huh?
Noah.
We did not do a sea level rise study as part of this, but we used the data that was out there. But
Right.
your understanding is the committee is using that, and Noah's using that here. I know like Charleston has different numbers that they're using.
That's part of the problem, Jeff, is every extrapolation for sea level rise for our area is data poor, because we've got Charleston and we've got Savannah.
Exactly, so we're just, yeah.
So they're projections, totally. I think one of the recommendations that we put forward out of the task force was we need localized tidal gauge data to help calibrate what we're truly experiencing and not what's happening down in Tybee.
We're looking at installing some in the next fiscal year or two, a couple of gauge stations, one in Broad Creek.
Awesome.
And then maybe something on the back end somewhere. Maybe we coordinate on locations for the mutual benefit.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful.
Trying to locate a file here to about proposed improvements.
I think it was included in the agenda.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys got this packet. It was on that packet.
And we don't have to delve into all the details, but it just shows really the locations of the new floodway ditches and culverts and tidal gates and for each location.
What else?
It was in the board packet. She's trying to pull up that document right now.
Email it to me, I can get it. Ah, there it is.
Sorry for the inconvenience here.
Not a problem, not a problem.
So we're gonna go forward. This is kind of reading and
D3 or
this is right after. It's coming up here.
the next one.
All right, here we go.
Keep going.
No, this is, we'll stop on this one. This is, we're ready to go, and stuff out, but this is, how we prioritize the ditch cleaning here. You can see the red highlights underneath are all the major DOT roadways. Ashwood Circle, those systems need to be completely reestablished to help. We did some minor cleaning in Duluth, you can see in that area. But all the ditches that we looked at upsizing were all DOT maintained that had just been, I guess, forgotten about over the last 20 or so years. So this is the first priority area we looked at. This is the existing conditions model that we did, and we included in this packet the existing conditions model so you can see the hours flooded, the number there. It's easier to tell the node. If the node is blue, no flooding, green, minor flooding, and up to red, which is 24 hours, just clogged pipe. The purple, it's hard to tell. I don't know if you can zoom in on that at all. I don't need to get into too much detail. I'll just go over this first one so you guys can see.
If this is a DOT causing problem, I don't know why they don't bring in Wesley Newton to answer for
Yeah,
it.
so you can see we're getting some 13 hours flooded. It's a little deceptive in that that's just from a 90% full culvert. The hydraulic model doesn't push through all that, so you're getting those high numbers. But in reality, you do have some pretty significant flooding. From some of the citizens' complaints in this area, we heard 8-9 hours of flooding at times, if not more. If you scroll down,
I can tell you both the county.
One of the things, the citizen complaint log obviously helped verify and truth our existing conditions model.
Major
We showed that most significant areas are flooding where actual flooding did occur and all the complaints happened. So it was very valuable data.
so this is just the improvements. The red shows where we want to reestablish this cross section. All those culverts are going to be cleaned out. Any thick blue line is a upsized feature, including we're going to upsize some 15-inch culvert with 24 there, and then redo the ditches per our typical ditch cross section, which is included in the main report. Scroll down to the next one. This area, our model was based off of depths measured in the field off of the digital elevation model. So when we came in an area like this where there's a lot of tree cover or near buildings, you see a lot of kind of skewed data. So there was a lot of assumptions that had to be made. This area right here, there's a buried culvert, completely buried culvert. If you scroll down to the next page, that needs to be unearthed. It's where that green line is right there. There have 2 or 3 citizens' complaints in that area of water just standing there because it's got nowhere to go. Keep scrolling down, or if you scroll back up just 1 second, the system to the top here where it says heavy cleaning system required, that's just all full of sediment. There's all the driveway culverts are bad. There's no ditches. There's a small 12-inch line going out to that main section, which is just completely filled with sediment and failed in a few locations.
Is it failed as in not working or failed as it needs, it's just?
Failed as in there's holes in the system, there's roots all through it, it's just not draining.
It needs to be replaced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Keep going down. And you'll see on all those existing conditions, any purple pipe is just completely filled with sediment, just about. These were the major improvements. You can see the kind of cross sections that we used there, providing the floodplain to keep that water in the system. You'll see that we kept everything, the hours flooded on everything under an hour, usually under 30 minutes, which all that means is the top of the pipe was surcharged. That doesn't mean it's popping out of the ditch. So the things you're seeing there are just the pipe is surcharged during the storm event and then it goes back down in 30 or so odd minutes.
And these improvements will be good for how long?
These improvements will need to be, how long? I think that detailed design is needed with survey grade data. These are all based on digital elevation.
The improvements will be good for as long as the system is maintained. Now, depending on sea level rise and everything else.
Yeah, but you're only taking into account so much sea level rise. So once we reach that point, then your recommendations are no longer valid.
Well, so we used an estimation or the 15 inches over 50 years of sea level rise, which is kind of what currently the county is utilizing. So that being said, this is, again, we're not solving a drainage problem, we're improving it. So it will always be improved. Will it be future improvements depending on future conditions? Of course. But the new infrastructure will obviously be good for 50-plus years, depending on what types of materials you use, and then it's just a matter of maintaining the ditches. And obviously, the DOT hasn't maintained them, and we have no reason that they're going to maintain them in the future. Even if they clean them out once, then something needs to be put in place so that they are continually maintained, so it doesn't go back in the current condition.
Katie, the increase sea level rise that they're using, what is that based on in terms of time? Or you don't have any, you just said we're gonna use this much?
For 50 years. 50
It's
years.
just the anticipated, based on what they're seeing now, they've just taken it out 50 years, so they're using that 1.3 feet as what we could anticipate seeing, but it's not, there's no proof positive that that's gonna be the real number in 50 years.
No, because the evidence is that the sea level rise is increasing
Right.
faster than they project.
But these are the NOAA projections coming out
Well, these are
of
the
Charleston.
This is all what they
Yes,
know
it's a-
now.
It's a logarithmic curve, obviously, the sea level rise, and that's the concern. They've taken the current data that we have into consideration. Obviously, that's.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an idea though of what this really means.
Donald Trump.
When
You're not
we
familiar.
Selling property.
pay for these improvements, what are we paying for? You know, what can we tell these people? Oh,
Well,
you're okay for 5 years.
We're
10
going to do
years.
this right. I mean, I think some of those graphics are pretty eye-opening that in 50 years, look, your house could potentially be underwater. We need to do everything we can sooner rather than later to help address the problem. But there are going to be continued efforts, and things that we're going to need to.
Well, as Kim said, you know, people who are buying property in these locations, you know, it'll be buyer beware.
It's complicated. It's complicated at all levels.
And that plan is still, I think, up for discussion as well. There was some pushback from the HBA.
For just that reason, that suddenly you're impacting people's property values if you're disclosing that you're a potential flood risk, you know, based on potential data. It's a lot of,
Potential.
Well, welcome to the low country.
I think that one of the things that we, kind of key on in managing stormwater in the communicating with the citizens is there's stormwater and then there's the outfall condition, which is the sea level. And the tide goes in and out every day, and if the tide is going to go in and out every day and go a little higher over time, that changes the tailwater conditions for our challenge to make our stormwater systems function. But at a certain point, the stormwater stops, and it's the sea level that is the matter that we're concerned with, and that line moves. We all expect it to move inland, and the places that are their primary concern is now the sea level, no longer what happens in a storm. We want to make sure that people who are still upstream of that can be best served against the more adverse outfall conditions in the stormwater systems that remain.
We keep talking about the outfall conditions, and our politicians are cognizant of the fact that the more we build closer to the water, the more pollutants we generate for the water. Yet no one dares want to talk about moratoriums on building near water because real estate values are higher when you have water views.
I think that's where your development standards are important for buffers and setbacks.
And setbacks, and truly setbacks, or moratoriums on building within certain setback areas. We don't seem to want to tackle that.
And those are items that are being discussed at the Sea Level Rise Action Plan Committee. Right now, we've created what we see as a 10-year plan with community development, with planners, with C grant? C grant?
SEC grant.
Yeah. Our Rob Merchant, the community development administrator, is spearheading that campaign. So these are all conversations we're having right now for action and to get this information to not only the public, but to the politicians as well. So we're having the conversations, but it's definitely not going to be an answer we can solve in the next year or two.
There's a great opportunity here for clearly a lot of cross-collaboration internally within organizations, amongst and between organizations as well. Clearly, this plan, I think the time frame for the county being the lead on it is June, late June, maybe late July, so coming up. And it's important because we all represented, I mean, Hilton Head was there, Bluffton was there, I think Beaufort had folks there, Port Royal had folks there. So it was a great regional effort, going from stormwater to planning to floodplain managers to building zone officials under the guidance of Sea Grant with Sarah Watson being the subject matter expert to help facilitate those conversations. And Rob did an excellent job being project manager of it. It's going to be key, I think, once it's finalized, as we're all working through our comp plans, that y'all are much further into that process than the town is. But the comp plans all require a resiliency and adaptation element in them. And so this plan is going to be instrumental, I think, for all of us to check that box. It's now a state requirement for our comp plans, but then it also sets out the work plan for us as staff to engage consultants further to assess these types of situations. What types of policies can we put in place to address stormwater and to address sea level rise? I mean, there's clearly the interface. It's complicated. It's complicated.
As you know, a lot of other communities aren't necessarily looking at setbacks. They're looking at minimum elevations and building higher, not necessarily pulling back. I mean, because obviously there's landowner rights and a lot of different factors. I mean, we did a project for Shem Creek in Mount Pleasant and looked at trying to maintain the history, but also bring new building into conformity. Being right on the creek, but elevating it. We looked at different case studies, similar areas of Boston now. Their finished floor elevations have to factor in the projected, I think it's 2050 sea level rise projections in that. So they're designing for those standards now.
Is that what they did in Shem Creek? Just
Well, we were at the study level for that. So we made some recommendations, and they were adopting some things into their comp plan. And a big part of that was the building code recommendations. So, and that's, there's different levels you can do. There's the heated, obviously, square footage area, and there's deck space, and there's a lot of businesses in that area, so it's a little different. It's not exactly applicable to residences. But all those types of things are being looked at, and I'm sure the county as well, and their departments and their planning efforts as well. So I wish I had all the answers. I'd be even dizzy.
I'd say you wouldn't be standing in front of us. Any other questions for these gentlemen? We thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
It's interesting work, y'all. Seriously. It's really cool.
Next on the agenda is our budget amendments. Katie and Ms. Allen, I'm sure she wants to talk.
Ms. Wallace? Yes, so back in March, we presented the proposed budget, which was
2022.
approved by you all. And since then, we got some feedback coming from county administration on ways to minimize spending and budgets all around. The two sections they were really looking at as far as minimizing expenditures was personnel, looking at how many positions that have remained vacant for quite some time. There's a lot of carryover with that salary. And we took a look at positions that should be should be removed from the budget because they have not been filled in quite some time. The other area they wanted all departments to look at was their capital improvement budget. If they had money available to them in the current fiscal year, they wanted to have all departments expend as much as they could to limit some of the carryover into FY22. So we were able to eliminate 1.2 full-time positions, which saved the county just over $90,000. And our other removals was for a SUV. We are looking at doing a motor pool with our fleet management group. So we requested a vehicle, but at this time it was determined it's not necessary.
That was for your assistant, I remember.
Yes. Miss Julianna has her used F-150 pickup
This
truck.
was for somebody before Julianna, or for the open
It
position?
had been, yes, it's been carried over from FY20 budgets FY21's budget as well. It was not purchased. We anticipated purchasing it with the onboarding of the environmental engineer position, and we determined it wasn't necessary.
So she's going to share yours?
I mean, I will be happy to share my vehicle with all who need it, but we did have a truck that she could utilize instead of an SUV, so.
There we go.
Saved some money there, and then we are purchasing another large piece of equipment, a lowboy trailer, under this fiscal year, so we don't have to have that in our FY22 budget. So with the budget updates, we did see some decreases to what the cost, not the cost sharing, but the management budgets for the different municipalities, what they have to contribute, that went down. So we provided that report to them, and they've all re-provided the concurrence letters for that. So first budget reading was late last month, and we've got our second reading next week, June 14th.
Is this with the 10,013,000 versus the 10,593 that was presented last time?
Yes, so it's up on the screen, and Carol, it's in your board packet as well. Carolyn provided the breakdown of what that looks like, what it looked like proposed, and then what, with our revisions, how our budget went down from those proposals, from what was proposed to you all previously. So if there's any questions on that, happy to answer them.
Is this going to handicap you in any way?
No.
No questions from anybody here?
Okay. Like I said, second reading for that will be next Monday, the 14th, and third and final for ultimate approval will be at the June 28th meeting. So.
Okay, well, this almost begs the question of the last agenda item, which is our meeting schedule that we had talked about during the last meeting. That we are in right now the 3-month decision process, and we asked Katie to go back and find out whether we can amend that schedule among ourselves or whether it took an act of somebody above us to approve that. Katie, what did you find out?
Yes, so thankfully this does not need to go to Congress. We determined that as long as the board has another vote on what they would like the schedule to look like, it won't affect any of the committee or boards and commission staff. It can be an easy change, nothing preventing a change. I do have 3 proposed schedules for meetings, the first of which is our current schedule. We've got, the intention was to go quarterly, but because of what our year looks like, currently we have 5 meetings slated, the next of which is going to be September 8th with our final meeting in early November. The second option is to go quarterly. So right now, yes, to go quarterly.
No.
I apologize.
June, September. February and March are back to back, and then it jumps to.
Is this because of your timeline with the budget? Wasn't that part of the timing?
It was that for the meetings, yeah.
For the first one, maybe? I don't know.
Because here we have a new budget that's already gone, and we didn't even see the changes or have a chance to even talk about the changes in the budget before it went to council, because we're meeting every 3 months. Just for edification purposes.
So are we looking for a motion to change it to every 2 months?
Well,
So that's the third option. The third option is to go every other month meeting.
I would suggest if we have a motion, then we can have some discussion about it.
I motion to go to every 2 months.
Second.
All right, discussion?
I'm good with that personally.
Which?
That going to with the motion.
Any,
Every 2 months, sounds good.
Alan?
Well-
You've been here longest.
The fact that the budget's behind us now, so the next few months is not oriented to the budget, it's the beginning of next year. So maybe we can finish out this year quarterly, and then next year, look at changing it.
But don't we need to discuss that to affect the change now for next year?
No, we're just looking at this year. Correct?
I think the whole
Yes.
purpose of the motion was to be more on top of things,
Yeah.
so we can see it.
It's not just the
It's not
budget.
just budgets, everything about what we do as a board, to have more insight and input and supervision over it.
I think to answer your question, Alan, the quarterly meetings with one extra meeting was done for the budget purposes. But yet we still find ourselves behind the 8 ball when it comes to the budget by having quarterly as opposed to every other month. You want to weigh in?
What does staff think about every 2 months?
Staff is amenable to having it every other month. It is a lot of work to put these
Right.
days together. However, I do agree some of these gaps do seem a little bit long. I know we're still providing board reports, board packets to you all monthly, and we appreciate everybody providing that information to us. We haven't heard any feedback about what's been provided, so if there are issues on that end, please feel free to reach out. But other than that,
The only thing I would ask with that motion, are we saying starting now we would go to every other month, or were we talking about next year every other month?
I would put in the motion to start effective every 2 months.
Start
the way-
effective now.
Katie's schedule here on every other month. So we have an August 11th meeting, 2 months,
Correct.
followed by October and December.
Correct.
So if we approved it, this is the schedule we would
Correct.
follow.
We would stay with the second Wednesday of the month.
Okay, I second the motion.
And if for some reason Katie can't be here, she now has an assistant. That could take over while she's absent.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
We had a second. It was just discussion. We already had a second, Alan, but that's okay.
Second it again.
Yeah, well, now we got a
I
third.
really mean it,
We got a third.
second time.
Yeah, I know.
Ex officio people, you
It's fine.
care one way or the other?
Personally, it's fine by me, either way.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, every 2 months.
Working anyway.
I think it's good for staff
We're
because
working anyway,
honestly,
exactly.
pulling this together every month
Is a
and then-
lot.
is a
It's a
lot.
lot of work, yeah.
But never mind the other, they're working with natural resources or whatever else. So I think every 2 months is fair.
I think there's some discussion about, there might have to be the February, March back-to-back
Well,
because of the
that,
timeline of the budget.
I think the way it's laid out right here makes no sense. Might still be missing a meeting that you guys are talking about there.
yeah, this is not,
May.
this wouldn't, this,
That,
No.
if you
But
might
I'm
want to
talking
add a
for
meeting
next
in
year.
May, even if it's got a more targeted agenda.
Well, that's 2021.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's not next year.
no.
well, if it does get voted on, what would be the next meeting?
if it goes to every other month, the next meeting would be in
August
August.
11th.
Okay.
Yeah.
August
August 11th.
So now we just need a vote.
Carolyn actually just brought up a
I
really
wanted to
great
hear what Carolyn had to say.
Carolyn brought up a really great point. In November, at November's meeting, we do have to provide boards and commissions certain updates, and you all have to vote on them. So we could amend this to instead having a meeting at the end of December. Typically, that's really slow for us. We could amend that December date to the November 10th date.
Very good point, very good point. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Would you consider that in your motion?
Would you, let's go ahead and put that part into my motion to amend that date to make it November 10th, please. To be included.
Adopting option 3, going every other month with removing the December 14th meeting and replacement of the November 10th meeting.
Let's go with that, please.
Correct.
That sounds correct.
Correct.
I second that.
Again, anything from the municipalities about that?
All good by me.
Gentlemen, vote. All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So we will make that update where appropriate on the website, and we will see you all in 2 months.
Okay.
Can I ask for a meeting invite? Do we have meeting invites currently or not?
It's just an email reminder, but I'd be happy to set up meeting
That would be
invitations.
wonderful.
Yes.
I kind of got used to those calendar updates every month.
My problem was every time I tried to use it, it sent messages to everybody.
We just ignore those, don't worry about it.
I couldn't
We
figure
just know
out.
it's gonna happen.
Maybe
I
that's
stopped
what's
touching it
happening.
because it was going crazy and my Mac just went nuts.
Delete.
So in the November meeting, we will be voting
Like an
for,
official budget on the calendar.
no, not the
Voting for,
budget. We'll be
next
voting
year's.
for next year's.
Next
budget.
year's.
Yeah, all you do is enter Tuesday at 9 in his own calendar.
Correct,
Coming quick.
correct.
I'd rather have a leg up on it than
I
that.
thought he was joking, he was serious.
Thank you.
Public comment? Now we get to vote on the next meeting agenda.
I move that we approve it with the change of the next meeting to be Wednesday, August the 11th.
So I hear a second.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Is there anything or for the good or cause of stormwater that wants to be discussed? Municipalities?
Motion to adjourn?
Do I hear a second?
Second motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do me a new favor.
Meeting adjourned.
That